My name is Marsha Pilz. I had an abortion. I was 18 in 1965, the year I had an abortion. I couldn't tell my parents, my sisters, my college friends. I could only tell my best friend, who also was 18 and as naive as I. Somehow I learned of a physician in the university area who performed abortion. I must have presented myself as an insecure young woman, and he encouraged me to go home and tell my parents, but this was not a choice for me. I was the only member of my family to ever attend college. My working class family never talked about personal relationships, sex, or anyone single being pregnant. The man I was seeing at the time was much older than I, and spent a great deal of money on me, taking me out. I was very impressed. However, it's clear I knew nothing about character when I was 18. The man promptly dismissed me when I told him about my pregnancy. A friend of his knew someone who performed abortions. He helped me to arrange the abortion and took me to a cheap motel where I stayed for a weekend until the fetus was expelled. The procedure had been very painful, and I remember thinking I might die. The other scary part was that I didn't have enough money. This was a cash business, and I persuaded the abortionist that I could raise the rest of the money. My friend also told him her boyfriend was coming home from school and would lend me the rest of the money. Of course, this was not true. But I was very desperate and persuaded him to perform the abortion. However, he harassed me by telephone for several weeks after. I was able to borrow a little bit more money and the harassment ended. I returned to the physician at the university for follow-up care. He was surprised to see me, and after examining me, we discussed birth control. However awful the abortion was, I felt I made the right decision, both then and now. I thought Roe v. Wade would dramatically change things for women. In some ways, of course, it has. But there are still many hurdles for women, particularly poor women. I became involved with groups supporting women's rights. I was a volunteer counselor with a group that raised money for poor women who chose to have abortions. And I was a clinic escort when there were protesters who were threatening women. One day at a rally, almost 20 years after my abortion, I was asked to be interviewed by a newspaper reporter who wanted to speak to a woman telling her story. But I could not be anonymous. I had to give my name. After some thought and encouragement from my husband, I granted the interview. That was the first time I spoke openly about my experience. Now I am much more comfortable and open, but I never give many details. I usually change the subject to talk about the present situation for women. Even today, it is a struggle to tell my story. Yes, I never would have gotten through school. I would have disappointed my family. It wasn't so much disappointing my family. I have a horrible, I'll just speak about it. I have a horrible father. He was not a nice person. He was mean. He didn't want me to go to school. He was saying, what are you going to do with this? What are you going to do with this degree? Are you going to hang it in your nursery? You know, none of my sisters went to school. I'm very different from anyone in my family, and I had to make it, and I had to make it on my own. I didn't know, I met his friend when I was seeing him, and his friend liked me, and his friend said to me, you know, you are a really nice young woman. He didn't probably say girl then. He said, you're a really nice girl. This guy's a creep. I don't know what you're doing with him. You know, you go to college, you're smart. He was a gambler, went a lot to racetracks, and he would give me money, and I could bet on all the horses I wanted to, and and go to nice restaurants. I mean, for me, that was, you know, really something.
Do you know if he was a doctor?
I don't know. I don't know, and I was so desperate, I really didn't care. I just knew he did abortions, that's what I was told. He didn't seem like a very nice person, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. I'm assuming because of the year that this was a saline abortion? But
I think so. You know, now that I know about abortions, I think so. But again, at the time, I was 18. I didn't know anything. I just knew I had to have an abortion. And that's what happened.
And the physician that you saw for follow-up care,
Yeah.
when you saw him the first time, did you understand him to mean, when he asked you to talk to your parents, that he wouldn't do the abortion because he thought you
I think he thought that I was young and I didn't know what I was doing, and he didn't want to take the risk. I think that's what I think now. That's what I think now, looking back at it. Then I was just devastated. Left the office. It was a very crowded office, and you just sit there and wait your turn, and it was a very poor neighborhood, and I was just in tears when I left.
And then you went back to this guy afterwards for follow-up care, and did you say I had an abortion?
Yes, I did. I said I had an abortion, and I wanted him to examine me, and I told him what happened, and he, as I said, he seemed really surprised, but he sat me down and talked to me about birth control and birth control pills, and he was very nice.
Did you ask for information, or did he volunteer it, or?
He volunteered it, I think, and encouraged it.
Did that surprise you?
No, I was glad.
Okay.
But I think it needs to be more conversational.
Yeah, I do
mean,
too.
I think that's the point of this, is that it has to be more conversational. Because I think, you know, these rights are being chipped away and chipped away and chipped away for women. And it has to become conversation. She did at some point. She said, and I said to her, but you know, Meredith, do you know anybody else? I said, you know, Meredith, the statistics are 1 in 3. She said, well, then I must know someone. And I said, well, Meredith, you should start asking. So I told her to start asking.
Good.
And then
Good work, Marsha. Good advocacy work, Marsha.
Well, something last night.
we were in a restaurant. Somebody came over and sat next to us, the person who's taking care of the dog. I said, oh yeah, I'm doing a video at my house tomorrow. I'm telling the story of my abortion. She said, oh, I had 3. So I said, oh, you have to tell your stories. She said, oh, I can't, but I'll work on her. However awful the abortion was, I felt I made the right decision, both then and now. I'm very different from anyone in my family, and I had to make it, and I had to make it on my own.